Hi, it's gotta be a wolf here. This time, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just tell a story without any prompts. I'm gonna see where it takes me, where it takes all of us. Alright, so here we go. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was this rocky terrain, or really a rock, that floated on the ocean. It was the only thing above the ocean in this world. Nothing else was around. It was just this rock floating forever. Its bottom, the bottom of the rock was in the ocean so long that it grew this shell to resist water, the decaying that would normally come from a rock. And as the rock was floating, it managed to get some little creatures on it. They came from the sea, and they decided that they really liked this rock, but they felt really lonely. So they inhabited it, so the rock wouldn't feel lonely. And thousands of millions of years passed, and the sea creatures who originally went on the rock lived, had kids, died out, and so on and so forth, until there was this whole population on this rock. And the population on the rock were called Eartha. They were called Earthas. There were many of them, and they found soon that there wasn't enough room on the rock for them. There was just too many of them. So what they did was they decided that they were going to take resources from the ocean to help add more land. Because in the time they've been on the rock, after generation after generation, they didn't have gills or anything that would help them breathe underwater. They lost those abilities. And so they were pretty much stuck on the rock. The question was that they needed stuff from the bottom of the ocean because there wasn't any other rocks all over the world. Or if there was, they did not have a boat that could take them to this other place that has resources. They had to stick with where they were right now and what they can get. They decided to mine the hard shell on the bottom of the rock that helped keep the rock from having this decay, being in the water so much. And they dug through the top layer of this rock, of this shell. They didn't dig any further though. They had this incident when they first started digging. They dug on one side, and that one side caused the rock to feel that shift in weight, and so it tipped. That scared everyone super badly. They figured out we can carve at least along this one line of shell, but not the whole thing, otherwise our one island, our one rock, will be destroyed. So they carved only around it. And they knew that this precious shell was, that's it, precious. They decided to make the most of it by not using it right away. They didn't use it right away. Instead, they spent the next 3 generations looking through all their options. There was a group of earthers that believed if they made the shell into a boat and sailed off into the vast sea, they would find a different rock somewhere. One that maybe they can pull to their rock, making it even bigger. Another group of earthers said, no. There's no rocks anywhere. We've been floating for many generations, and none of our ancestors ever said anything about other rocks. But we know there's stuff on the ocean. We do fishing to get food. There's no trees. There's none of that. There's just fish that they eat. Fish, and they boil the water of the ocean to drink. We have to get resources from down there. There is no other resources. There was a group that came out when they first carved out the shell, this protesting group, who believed that we shouldn't be taking any more resources. If we do, then we're going to tip the rock again, and we're all going to die. These three groups argued for 3 generations after they carved the shell. Finally, the plan was set. The 3 groups really, at that point, after 3 generations, the rock island was super filled with other earthers, and they really had no room. And there's starting to be fighting. There's starting to be this war on land, and everyone's starting to feel crowded, and it was getting very, very nasty on the island itself. The 3 groups then had to quickly decide in a week what they were going to do. And they were arguing and they were arguing. One earther, a little boy, who was very into this whole argument because he's been around the island. He's with his family who was entertainers. And so he's seen many different earthers. He's seen different cultures that came from around the island. He spoke every single language in this island. There weren't too many, but he did speak all of them. And he saw all these different perspectives. Everyone had their own thought about which group was right. And he thought about it while his parents were traveling and while they were doing their entertainment. And when he finally got to where the council, the 3 groups, was meeting, he went up and snuck in. He wanted to see what happened with the final result. Everybody wanted to see what happened with the final result. There was crowds of earthers pouring in to go to this council and be there when the announcement comes out of what they're going to do. It's a very important thing. It was so bad that there had to be actual police not police, but they had these enforcers, these kind of like security guards who had to keep people out of where the council was because there's too many people being there at once. And they set up even this system to calm people down where the council was at the tippy toppest of this rock. That's where they were located, and in order to tell everyone which group had won, they would send up a fire signal. So there was a pink fire signal for the group that didn't want to do anything. There was a green fire signal for the group that would go exploring for new lands on top of the ocean. And then finally, there was this dark black fire that would signal to everyone, we have chosen to take on the group's idea to go inside the bottom of the ocean using these shards, using the shell. And so that calmed many people down, so it wasn't so crowded. But then the boy's parents, the entertainer boy's parents, made it into the city before they can get kicked out. And so the little boy went and he hid it inside of the council room. He snuck in. Him and a bunch of other kids had snuck in. They were listening in on this council's arguments. The pink council, the ones that didn't want to do anything, kept arguing their point that the earth that they were on literally tilted when they took things from it, when they took the shell. If they unbalance it any further, they don't know what's going to happen. They can't survive underwater. Maybe they could turn the pieces of the shell they had into this environment that they can survive underwater, and someone can live in it, but it would only be someone. They don't even have enough to fit 2 Earthers down there in that shell home, and they would run out of oxygen really fast. The Black Fire group that said we should go under the bottom of the ocean argued, yes, the rock tipped when we took out some of the resources, but then we took out the resources around it. We made it equal, we made it balance back. If we can be cautious about how we're taking things from the bottom of the ocean, we can do that. And we already know that. And the Black Fire group argued as well that they've been studying the rock. And while it's not even close to being what it was the rock is gaining back its shell. It's coming back. It just needs time and to be left alone. So they can keep taking shells after much time. The problem is they don't have that much time. Their population's way bigger than the actual rock itself that they're living on. They need more land, or they need to tell everyone we can't have more kids. Now the kids listening in on this were horrified. They thought when the adults said we have no kids, that means they're going to get rid of us. We're taking up space. The adults just want to be on their own. So that really scared them. The Green Fire group that wanted to go explore the land argued that while yes, Black Fire has a point that the shell is coming back around, the shell that they took is coming back around the rock, it still doesn't mean that if they take anything from the bottom of the ocean that it will come back in time, or that it won't completely leave the ocean unbalanced. They were lucky enough that there was enough ocean and stuff that fish were overpopulated to, there was a lot of fish in the ocean that they can take. They were lucky with that, but they don't know what's below that. They literally don't know what's below the surface. No one has ever tried going below the surface before. They fished to the ocean, so people have tried to swim in the ocean. Never have they dived. Certainly not even close to being a third of the length of the ocean. If they go exploring other lands, they know that they can take more shell from other lands, like they have with their own, and it would come back in time. If there's plenty of other rocks, they can take so much shells that they'll have much more resource that they can use it to help their own island. From overpopulation, from in case for some reason they would end up on the bottom of the ocean, build this whole terrarium kind of thing where they can survive, but they would need the shell parts that they have to build a boat. And the Black Fire group said, we only have enough for one Eartha to be on it. We don't have any more than that. You guys are saying that let's take this precious shell, turn it into a very specific shape, a boat, which they didn't even know how to. They didn't know how to make sturdy enough. They had tried with rock on their land on the rock to make boats, but they always sank. So they assumed that they built the boats wrong, and not that the rock that they were using was not very suitable to float above water. And so the Blackfire group said, we don't know how to build the boat correctly so that it will float. All of our other boats have sank. You want to take this precious resource and build something you don't know how to build, and if you mess up, we don't have any more of that resource. Or at least we're going to have to wait many generations for it. Or take out all the shell at the bottom of the rock we haven't yet and really mess us up, because it will completely turn over the whole island and we'll all drown. All of the three groups then sat there. They just sat there sad. No one really had any good answer. There was advantages to each and disadvantages to each. They really didn't know what to do. The little boy from the entertainers got up from his hiding spot and he walked over to the three groups. He walked over to this council, and almost immediately the green leader, the leader of the Green Fire, was about to call for security because they thought that some raging adult was in there because the kid was walking very purposefully and they didn't see him yet. Then finally they saw it was a kid. They all calmed down for a second, told the kid to leave please while they make this decision. They understand that he wants to be here and he wants to listen. He might want to put his input in, but he needs to leave. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And the little kid said, what do we need? Why are we arguing so much? Isn't the answer obvious? And everyone turned to him. The little kid's hiding. All three of the councilmen, they all turned to him and be like, excuse me? What do you think we need? And the little kid said, we need to use the rocks we have, not just these cool shell rocks. Everyone looked to him and very confused. The Pink Fire said, what other rocks are you talking about? Are there other rocks that can survive in the water? And the boys said, well, we have these inner rocks, right? Right now the island's floating and it's touching the water and it's still okay. And it's getting a new shell. So we know that the rocks are coming from, the shell is coming from the rock touching water. And the councilman said, yes, that's true. The shell's gonna grow and then we can take that, but that takes too long. And the boy said, but we have all this inner rock. We have the whole island they were on was like this jagged diamond-shaped rock. And the boy said, when I was traveling with my parents, I saw a lot of construction happening on the island, on the rock island, and they took out the inner parts of the rock and they just threw them in the bottom of the ocean. Why not take that rock and attach it to a fishing line and put it out on the ocean so that it stays with the fishing? And then that'll get wet and it can grow more shell. And the councilman, the pink councilman, literally fell down from his chair. He just flew back. And the green one looked at the boy and said, that can happen. And the boy kept going. He said, and Liza came up with a really good idea too. Liza was a girl that he knew from one of his adventures. He said, Liza came up with a really good idea too. If we don't have enough shell to make a boat and go underwater, why don't we just do one now and do one when we get more shell. We don't know how to make a boat, but we also don't know how to make something that can work underwater. We just have the shell. We don't know what will happen if we don't even know what to make it. They didn't even know like scuba gear, not like a boat that goes underwater. They had none of this knowledge. The boy's like, we don't know anything about that, so maybe we shouldn't do that one first. Maybe we should make a boat instead. At least that one, you can make a boat. You can practice making a boat while the inner rocks that you take, is on the fishing pole to get more shell. You can practice that way. This pleased the green group. They were very happy with that suggestion, because they themselves, as much as they didn't want to admit it, really did not know how to make a boat. And they were very worried about messing it up, but they thought everyone else's ideas also sucked. Theirs idea was the best out of all the sucky ideas. So they're very happy with having more time to make a boat while also doing something else in the process. And the black fire group said, but we can figure out how to go underwater. Just like the boat group can figure out how the boat works while this is happening, we can figure out how water works with the shell once we have more of it. We can use the shell pieces we have for that. And the boy looked to that group and said, not yet, because we still have that problem that there's so many people on the island. Why don't we use the shell and see how little of it we can use to help keep them afloat? And everyone turned to the boy again and asked, what are you talking about? And the boy said, when I was traveling around, what I did a lot was I threw rocks into the ocean, like regular rocks, into the ocean. And I saw that there was this special rock that had come on shore, and it was literally a shell. And he said, when I threw that onto the ocean, it floated. But it was only a very tiny piece. And so when I found another shell, I put a huge rock on it because I wanted to see what would happen. And I threw them both into the ocean together. And the rock floated. It was a very big rock and it floated. So maybe we don't have to use the shell to worry about getting underneath the water to find more land. Maybe we can use the shells we have to make more lands. If we take out the inner parts of the rock, we put that on a shell, a very small shell, and we put that on the ocean. And then we can have these mini islands all around us. And the pink council looked to the boy and said, that would be a good use of resources. It's better if we put it all around the island so nothing tips, but I think we can make that work. And the councilman had the boy stay in the room while they talked in further detail. Although the boy didn't have any more details to give about a plan, he just let the adults talk. But the adults were very happy about this. They had never considered all these different possibilities to use the shell. There's always been, we're either going underneath the ocean, we're going on top of the ocean to find more land, or we don't touch anything so we don't ruin anything. They never thought they could do all three. Well, kind of all three. They can go underneath the water and search the sea while keeping everything in balance. And so when the council finally came out, many hours later, everyone was very excited to hear what they had to say. But what they did was, the council asked the boy to tell everyone their plan. The boy gave his idea to everyone, and the council then gave the more specified details and answered questions, and took questions from the people, the Earthers, who had some very valid questions and weren't answered. And the councilman didn't have an answer yet. And from the boy, they realized people have pretty good ideas. Maybe we should consider that. And so they took their questions and they kept the boy around as a pre-council. What they did was they counseled the leader of each of the colored councils, decided that in order to make this plan work, they would need all three of them to cooperate. And so they made the Council of Flames, with the little boy being a trainee to be part of the Council of Flames. The boy's color, the boy wanted to have the color of sapphire, after the color of the shell. That's what the color of the shell was. And when it finally came down to lighting that fire to tell all the other Earthers what the decision was, they saw that night a pink flame, a green flame, a black flame, and a blue flame. Now that just left everyone super confused to the point where all the Earthers decided that night they had to go immediately to the council city and to the peak and find out what the heck they're talking about, because no one said anything about blue and no one said anything about three colors working together. They didn't know what that meant. Maybe that meant that we're all going to die. Who knows? So after that debacle of everyone coming up to the peak and it being very distressing, the Council of Flames had worked for generation after generation. They took in different Earthers from every different section of the rock. They built these island homes that were strapped by fishing rods and had a little bit of shell underneath to keep them afloat, while more shell built underneath to the parts that were exposed to water, and people lived on them. It was one of the new hot places to live. Finally, they got enough shell and they got knowledge in how to build a boat. They didn't realize it was so simple that they can just put shell in a row and then rock in a row. But they figured it out after 5 generations. And so they built a very simple boat, and they had a crew, and the crew went and discovered, after many, many hundreds of thousands of years, there was generation after generation of these boaters, they called them, all searching the world, making marks on a map. And they found out that I wasn't lying in the beginning. There was no other islands. There was only this one island. I wasn't going to lie about that. But they found that out after many years. And it made a whole profession. And it spawned this job of going to different islands, not just to explore, but to also fish. There was different creatures living in the ocean in different parts of the world. And so it made a lot of exotic fish market. It made the exotic fish market boom. When they finally realized, hey, maybe there's not any islands around, they decided to make islands. The shells had been growing at that point, the shells of the island homes had been growing, and every so often, there was rock being built inside their jagged rock. They would get rid of it to make an island home, and then more of it would grow. So they kept taking that, and they ended up making these ginormous islands. The island homes became ginormous cities, like big. And they eventually cut away from the main island and became their own islands. And generation after generation had passed. Finally, the original jagged island figured out how to make a submarine. And they explored the bottom of the oceans. This time, they didn't need any resources. They already had what they needed from their one jagged rock that multiplied itself and created shell to keep itself afloat. So when they got to the bottom of the ocean, they just went to explore. They didn't touch anything, except they might have picked out a few fish along the way. You know, those exotic fish markets are top line fish. And everyone lived happily ever after. All because the one boy decided he was going to go sneak into a very high stakes councilman room. The end.